We go over and we just chat, but if you do have to hop off, feel free to. Don't be nervous to leave in the middle of or at the end of our presentation. Just in tech, we're a tech community for women of color, but we're joined every week by our allies. So that's people of different genders, races, and backgrounds who join us. We provide the resources and support to help women of color excel in their tech careers. So say hi in the chat, introduce yourselves, drop your name, perhaps your LinkedIn, your LinkedIn link, your current position or position you might be looking for, or the industry you might be trying to get into. And if you see anybody that you're interested in connecting with, connect with them on LinkedIn. Everyone that joins these happy hours tends to be willing to help each other out. And stay tuned. bridgesandtech.com website will be up and running soon. With that, I'd love to introduce our board. The board is comprised of Joanna Udo, who was talking earlier. She's our president. My name is Ymara Magloire. I'm your vice president, and Gina King is our director of programs. So we're going to start with Joanna. A few points about Joanna. She's a technology consultant, serial entrepreneur, business and career coach, and diversity, equity, and inclusion advocate. Next, me, I'm an incident response security engineer. I'm also an ambassador for cultural competency and diversity in the workforce. I'm a technology consultant and a small business owner. I have a small business with my mom called Out This Shop for Life. We sell exotic rum cakes if you're interested. And last but definitely not least, we have Miss Gina King. She is a technology sales consultant, small business advocate, and credentialed educator. Did you want to say anything, Gina?
Just very quickly, I mean to help people if they're looking for job opportunities or trying to transition, definitely reach out to me and I'll do all I can.
Oh yes, announcements. So the last happy hour or the last Wednesday of every month, we dedicate to being a mentoring session. So whether you're looking at a job application, a new position that you're interested in, a new certification you might want to get into, you want to vent about something that happened at work, the last happy hour of the month is dedicated for all things related to that. And it's within this group and it's not recorded. So, come as you are. Aside from that, we hold 2 events every month. Yes, 2 events every month which on whatever topic or speaker you guys are interested in hearing from. So reach out to me or Joanna and let us know who you'd like to see in the future. So yeah, so introduce yourselves. And with that, we'll get into today's panel. So the sponsor for this month's event is Ovation Point. The Ovation Point exists to help companies raise their standards for the services they seek. From technology resales, advisory consulting, staff augmentation, companies are encouraged to leave the mediocre highway and come to the Ovation Point. To learn more about sponsorship opportunities with Bridges and Tech, visit bridgesandtech.com/sponsor. And thank you to the Ovation Point. All right. So tonight's panel is on Blacks in Tech. The topic of tonight's happy hour is about Black professionals and technology. In the past year, we've all witnessed a disturbing trifecta between COVID-19, the economic downturn, and racism on a global scale. And the events of 2020 have negatively impacted women in particular. Women, especially women of color, are more likely to have been laid off or furloughed during the COVID-19 crisis. And the pandemic has intensified challenges that women have already faced. Meanwhile, Black women already face more barriers to advancement than most other employees. And today, they're also coping with the disproportionate effects of COVID-19 and the emotional toll of repeated instances of racial violence on the Black community. So in light of all of this and Black History Month, we decided to put together a panel to discuss the journey and career of Black professionals in technology. So I did prepare a small presentation to go into before we get into our panel. Many of you guys know, or if you don't, you'll know now, that the Black Lives Matter movement and #MeToo are two social movements founded by Black women that have increased pressure on businesses to raise the number of women, particularly women of color and Black women, into executive positions. And that's for good reason, right? Women in senior management remain underrepresented in corporate America, even though the numbers increased from 17% to 21% in 2015 to 2019. C-suite executives in particular, white women accounted for 18%, 68% were white men a year ago, and women of color, which included Black, Asian, and Latina women, accounted for just 4%, while 10% were men of color. So today, I just want to address the need for more women, and particularly women of color, in executive positions. So I prepared some points of discussion, and I want to raise awareness about microaggressions that Black women frequently encounter in and out of the workplace. So there is research done by a consulting company called McKinsey that found that 40% of Black women and female participants had their judgment questioned in an area of their expertise, compared with 36% of white women and 27% of men. Also, for whatever reason, the survey broke these stats into Black women and white women and just categorized men as a whole. So sorry, men of color, it didn't break that down for us, but we'll keep going with that anyways. Also, 33% of white men received job or executive leadership training, compared with 30% of white women and 19% of Black women. A quarter of Black women report their manager helps them to navigate organizational politics, compared with 39% of white women and 41% of men. And 35% of Black women say that their managers promote their contributions to others, compared with 46% of white women and 46% of men. So although some of these microaggressions may seem minor, the previous slide shows that they have long-lasting effects on our community. So now the question is, how and where do we start resolving these issues? And McKinsey suggested, and I agree, that part of the answer is in the recruitment, retention, and development of women of color in the workforce. So companies need to focus on talent acquisition and developing and retaining women while qualifying them to be promoted to leadership ranks where they can exert influence. But if we don't have the role models, if we don't have that person in the room to speak up for us, it can be extremely difficult to get a seat at that table. So with that, I would love to introduce role models who have broken through glass ceilings and concrete walls, and who've gotten a seat at the table and have dedicated their time to helping others navigate this system. And we're going to learn about their journey, their successes and their failures, and how they forged a path for those right behind them in the tech industry. And then we'll follow into a discussion about their experience with diversity in the workplace. So thank you for coming to my little TED Talk, and I'll pass the mic over to Gina to introduce our panelists for tonight.
Absolutely. We have Ms. Niles. We appreciate you for coming. And so I have for her that she drives cloud security adoption at Cisco Systems, over 10 years of IT experience, spanning a broad range of disciplines from systems engineering, networking, data center design, implementation, and cybersecurity. She has specialties in cybersecurity governance and compliance, risk management, threat mitigation, enterprise networks, and cloud infrastructures. And she also runs Empower Her Cybersecurity EHC, and I'm excited to hear about that. She's passionate about women in science and engineering, as well as STEM programs and girls in ICT. So everyone, welcome Niles. Thank you so much for coming. After that, we will have Mr. Chris Harris. Mr. Chris Harris on the panel as well. He is a CIO and an Information Assurance Program Manager at the U.S. Army, and he'll explain all about that. He has his CISM, CISSP, several certifications, and he also has specialties in project management, risk management, change and configuration management, and has spent a considerable amount of time as an adjunct professor. So welcome him. And then Mr. Larry Whiteside Jr., CTO, CISO. He's joining us on the panel as a Chief Technology Officer and Chief Security Officer. And he will explain a lot about his time as a USAF officer, thought leader, and he's also co-founder and president on the board of directors at the International Consortium of Minority Cybersecurity Professionals. I'm excited to hear about that. It's a nonprofit. And with extensive experience presenting at conferences such as the Gartner Security Summit, RSA, and other conferences. I'm sure we'll hear about those. And then also we welcome Gina Sharp. Still weird for me to say my own name. Welcome, Gina. She's a CISO, and she's joining us as with a BS in cybersecurity and a minor in computing. She will talk to us about her over 15 years in information technology and cybersecurity professionalism. She has certifications as a CISM, Splunk power user. Also, I see ethical hacker here, Security Plus. I'm excited to hear about all of that, as well as she's a member of the Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu. So I'm excited to hear about all of that. So those are the individuals on our panel today. We really appreciate you coming out, and I'll hand it back over to Miss Ymara.
Thank you. So I have about 10 questions prepared for everyone today. I split it up into 3 categories. First, I'd love to hear more about you all, and then we'll move into how you guys navigated your tech careers, and then a little bit more about diversity in the workplace. So my first question for you all is, what was the path that you took to get to where you are today?
Can anybody just jump in?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Gina. So I started out in IT. I worked on the help desk. I worked first, second, and third level support. Started out building and repairing computers and servers, worked in network and system administration, and then finally an IT project manager, where I worked in that role for a couple of years. And I got bored and spoke to a mentor. He didn't know he was my mentor. And just told him that I was bored in IT and I was looking for something a little bit more challenging. And so he suggested that I look into virtualization and security, and the rest is history.
Good evening. My name is Chris Harris. Thank you for inviting me today. My path was a little bit more unconventional. When I first started out, I had very high intentions from my childhood of being an architect. And I went to a very good school in the Detroit area. It was one of the top schools in the Detroit area. And in the 9th grade, they bring you in. It's kind of like they had a college setting. In your first freshman year, you kind of learned some basics of things you wanted to get out the way to get yourself prepared to go into your curriculum. So at the time I wanted to go into architecture, the acting counselor I had in the 9th grade and the architecture counselor had just broke up. And to get back at him, she blackballed me out of architecture. Now I'm a little kid and I don't even know what's going on. And I found out about this by the time I got to the 10th grade. So by that time I got into engineering, and I kind of felt it, but I wasn't feeling it. I really wanted to be an architect. So I went through school, and some semesters I did good. Some semesters I would just take a breather and clown around, which I'm not proud of. And then in the 12th grade, they offered a class at a school called Detroit Institute of Technology, which was next door. And they offered a class in Fortran. And I went over there and I got into it, and I really got into this computer stuff. I'm like, man, I should have been doing this all the time. Well, because I was from meager or humble beginnings, and it was during the Reagan era and a lot of Pell Grants and all that were being cut, I didn't take advantage of going to college. So I enrolled in the military, I enlisted, and I got into the computer field. And as I progressed through that, there were opportunities to become an officer, but I needed to get an education. So I started working towards that. And as I started to really understand myself and start setting goals for myself, I realized, hey, I can really do something with this. So I went ahead, because I was in the military, the GI Bill, I don't have any student loans, which is a blessing. Now, the caveat was I had to go to war, but that was just a byproduct of being in the military. So once I did my 20 something years, retired as an officer, I started charting a career path. And that career path consisted of several jobs, working at banks, hospitals, for the federal government. And at some point, I just started climbing the ladder, and I went back and got my master's. And then I started realizing the real seat at the table is the people who control the budget and make the decisions on hiring and influencing the direction of the organization. So I started focusing more on the strategic stuff, and I started to kind of get away from the technical stuff. But at first, to get recognized, you have to be good and sound technically. So I was very good at Cisco routers and switches. I was good on Unix boxes. I was good at all that stuff. And then to further that, I started teaching and sharpening my sword there and dealing with different people from different backgrounds. Once I did that, I started mapping out jobs that I thought that I would do good in. And I would give myself a limit. At this point, I'm gonna do this. And then at this point, I'm gonna learn a new skill. So my last piece to that puzzle was learning the budget and the financing and all that human resources stuff, because I was good technical. But if I wanted to lead a crew or an organization, I had to have those soft skills and administration and those things, business and all that. So I went that way. And as a man of faith, I put a little faith out there and stepped out and became the CIO of one of the major Army commands and we control probably about a $50 billion budget where we buy vehicles, robots, and all kinds of cool stuff that we send out to the soldiers in the field. And I'm the only person of color on the senior leadership team. So that comes with challenges. But I am glad that I did what I did. Do I have any regrets? Yes, I do. But I try not to focus on the past. And I look at where I'm at now. And now that I'm there, my goal is to reach back, lend a hand, and try to bring people up, build that bench so that we can have people in that line of succession so that when I go, I won't be the only Black CIO, and hopefully not even the only person of color in that senior leadership position. But I'm trying to pave the way and set an example for others to come behind me. So in a nutshell, that's who I am, and that's what I do.
So I'm gonna jump in because thank you for sharing that level of detail, Chris, because then I'm gonna get into some. But I'm gonna say, don't call them regrets, call them lessons, right? So I have a firm belief, right, that through our life, we don't have regrets. You can't regret anything because it was a step towards the path of you getting to where you are today, right? And so that decision or that event or whatever that was that happened in that moment, it happened purposefully, right?
Exactly.
To teach you something, to show you something, and to put you on the path to end up where you're at. So I don't look at anything as a regret, right?
Yeah,
and
that
so
might have been a
Right,
wrong
right.
choice of words, but it is the sum total of my life experiences. So
Exactly.
you're right.
That's exactly right. And that's God put you in that position for a reason at that time, right? So Larry Whiteside Jr. So I've been in this field of cyber for 28 years. Similar to Chris, I didn't anticipate this. This wasn't my life dream growing up. I if it were not for my mother getting divorced from my father and me having to switch from one high school in the hood to the high school on the affluent side of town, because my mom moved me, her, and my sister into a tiny one-bedroom apartment that was closer to where she was working, and I ended up going to a school as a junior and being introduced to computers for the first time, I wouldn't be here, right? That single event, as I look back, and as devastating as it was for me, being pulled away from my father, who I love so much, it ended up being the thing that got me here, right? And so, like you, Fortran was a thing, right? I learned Fortran. I was like, man, this is amazing. I can do this with this thing called a computer. I can write these programs. I can make things on the screen move. And so I went to college. I went to an HBCU, Houston-Tillotson University in Austin, Texas. And I thought I was going to be a developer. I thought I was going to be code all my life. I got a computer science degree, and then I got an internship at Motorola. And it was 500 million lines of COBOL code. And I hated every minute of it. And because I hated it, I was going to quit. And what they then did was they asked me, they said, well, hey, how about you try and break the code? How about you take each module that's being written and try and break it? And I was like, oh, now that's fun. Now, mind you, I was in college on a basketball scholarship. I was blessed with height and skill athletically in basketball. And so I'm traveling on our trips, and I've got this big brick of a laptop that people are wondering why I have this and why I'm carrying this and why after games I'm going to my room, right, bent over in front of this computer doing this thing. But it was fun, and it created a mindset for me that I thought I was going to get out of college and you know, after my internship and go find some other place that would ask me to break break code. And yeah, that didn't happen. I graduated from college and so was looking around like, well, what next, right? Like what is this whole job thing and how do I go about this? And so my grandfather pushed me to join the military and get my commission and become an Air Force officer. And so he was a Tuskegee Airman. He was in the first class of Tuskegee Airmen. And so for him, the military was life, and he felt that it could provide a life for me. And his exact words were, that technology thing, baby Larry, is going to die down, but they're always going to need pilots. Right? So I chuckle at that a lot today. I chuckled at that a lot then. So I did get my commission, went into the military, and I was very fortunate to get into a position where I was the head of technology and security for a base, a Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina. And so I got to build the first joint, at the time, network security infrastructure in the Air Force, right? So it was an amazing opportunity. I learned a whole hell of a lot, but similar to Chris, right? I had to look at myself and I had to say, you know, and sort of weigh my life. And I realized I was not a lifer. Military was not the life for me. Just because, you know, for those who are in the military, for those who have transitioned, have family, there are constraints of who you are in the military, how you operate, and the whole enlisted officer fraternization thing I had problems with, because I was like, I don't understand why I can't go hang out with this dude who's, you know, a good friend of mine. We have similar likes because he's enlisted. And so I ended up getting out of the service after 8.5 years. My last role, I ran security at the Pentagon for the Pentagon and all the agencies. And so it was a lot of fun. But, you know, then I got into this corporate world, and the corporate world will eat you up if you're not ready for it, right? And so when I first got out, I was running security as a consultant for the Southeast US and all of Europe. And I was traveling 95%, right? On a plane all the time in all parts of the globe doing things. And it was great. But then when the organization got acquired and they got new leadership in, right? Even though I was one of maybe 5 total people of color in the organization, I was one of the first ones to be let go as we were transitioning into the new org, right? And so I had to step back and reevaluate myself. And again, you know, I looked at all these things as unfortunate as it was. I looked at them as opportunities. Okay, what did I learn here? What's the lesson that I need to take? Excuse me. Hey, my dog. She all day she's chosen. Anytime I'm speaking, and she's going to chew on this one particular toy. So as I've gone through that multiple times where organizations are restructuring, reorganizing, whatever, and I end up being, right, one of few minorities, but I'm still the person that is put into this position of having to figure out what that next thing is going to be. And so I'll share with you guys as we go through this conversation, this dialogue, right, the things that I did and the things that I've seen my peers do, right, men of color in this industry and women of color in this industry who get into these executive level roles where we are not being heard, where we are not being, and a lot of times we get comfortable, right? And so the last 2 decades, I've been a CISO in an organization somewhere. This is my first role as CTO, but I've got both the CTO role and the CISO role in this organization. But we fall into the danger of comfort. And when we're not being heard and we're not being seen in our organizations, it is easy to say, but they're paying me a good salary, right? And I don't want to, raise a fuss and well, I really like this company, I really like the role. But if you're not being heard, you're not being valued, you've got a personal decision to make. And I have left organizations where I felt I wasn't being heard and I wasn't being seen, because I know that if it was somebody different in this role, they would have they would be treated a little bit differently. And so we'll talk through that as we go on. But that's my story.
Thank you, Larry. And then Gina Sharp, I wanted to give you some time to introduce yourself as well and the path that you took to get to where you are today.
So actually I did. Mine was just really brief. Yeah, mine was just really brief. I thought we were cutting it to like 1 to 2. So I just made mine really short.
Gotcha. Did Niles get a chance to speak? Do we have all 4 of us go already?
Nope,
Not
that's
yet,
who we're waiting
not
on.
yet.
Niles.
Niles.
That's for last, right?
Yeah, I've got to say, Ms. Gina, I am a little upset that you did not dig a little bit deeper there. So maybe we'll get to hear about it more through the conversation.
Yeah, I was trying to stay, within the time frame that was allotted based on the email, but I could have really elaborated. But yeah,
We're gonna come back to you. Right
Listen, Chris got me going. I heard Chris. I was like, oh Lord, yes, praise him. Let's go. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I apologize. This is my first time, so I'm not really familiar with the format of the protocol. So if it went over, I'll be quiet from now on.
No, that just means you all have to come back. It's fine. Go ahead.
Exactly.
That part too.
But Niles, all yours.
All right. Thanks, everyone. It's really, really nice to be here. I have to say that. And thank you for being transparent to both of the guys that have been transparent. That's one of the things that I find that it's not really out in the industry where people are really transparent about, their path and going through to get to where they are. About me, I really, when I was born here in the US, but I was born to African parents. And my African parents, they wanted me to be a doctor. Okay, so I'd made up all of these stories. I see some people smiling. So if you do have some really strict parents, so that may have been the story for you as well. But I was supposed to be a doctor. And I made up a good story about why I was going to be a doctor. And actually, I went to university to study pre-med. Went all the way to my 4th year. And then I was like, I hate blood. Like, I hate the smell of the hospital. Like, why am I making up all these stories of how I'm going to go and save the world? Like, this is crazy. And so I've always had that kind of rebel kind of, sense in me to wanting to do what I want to do if I thought it was the right thing. And so in my 4th year university, I changed my major to CIS, Computer Information Systems. And it just took me another year and I banged out all of the courses. I did a lot of overloads. And shortly after I finished university, I joined Cisco. I joined Cisco as a systems engineer. And in that role, I basically worked with account managers to basically provide services, professional services to commercial markets. And at one point, I was also supporting higher education. After that, I wanted to be, in that role, I gained a lot of certifications, a lot of Cisco certifications. And as an SC, I didn't really get to have a lot of hands-on experience. And so I was like, okay, I can't get this role that I want to do at Cisco. And so I left Cisco. Took another job where I was a network engineer and did a lot of fun things. And then went back to Cisco. And when I went back to Cisco, this time I joined Cisco Tech, and I worked with the data center part of Cisco, where I basically supported virtual infrastructure, being able to build out unified computing systems and being able to implement it and test and design data centers for actually Fortune big names. I'm not going to name any names because this is recorded. But it was really fun. It was super challenging. I was in that role. And I want to say that in that role, I was in that role for almost 3 years. And there were about 40 of us on the team. And I was the only female on the team. And I was only the only Black female on the team. And I knew one thing was that, you know, I know I'm smart, but I did know that I was not the smartest Black woman in all of America. And so that kind of just played in the back of my head. And so I continued. What I wanted to do was become best at what I did, right? Because I knew, you know, you have this aura that maybe you're not supposed to be here because you're the only one. It doesn't mean that, but for me, that just made me added fuel to the fire to overperform. And that is how I ended up passing my CCIE. And as you guys know, once you pass your CCIE, a lot of, you know, roles just get thrown at you. And I started really digging deeper into designing data centers and implementing them, and actually doing optimization and working really close with the developers. And it came to a point where one of the companies asked me about securing the data in the data center. And I really was like, no, there's some team on the other end that does the security stuff. I am really good at networking and virtualization. And but you know, being Niles, one of the things I love about myself is always looking for ways to make myself better, looking for ways to make myself a need in wherever I go. And so I was like, well, security, I don't know anything about it. Well, it's time to learn. And so that's how come I got into security. I started learning about it. I had to execute on the project, my whole team. We learned the technology, and yes, I became really good at it. And in fact, I became super paranoid about security at that point. Came home one day and I closed all like crazy ports in my house. And you know, my husband was like, "Oh, I need to get to Google. I can't get to Google." I'm like, "Oh, you want to go there?" Kind of got a little crazy. And then from then on, I pivoted into working with Cisco Umbrella. At Cisco Umbrella, I basically help drive implementation for cloud security. And then currently what I'm doing is actually driving cloud adoption. So basically working with the business unit to kind of help prioritize some of the requests from the customer. So that's what I do on a daily basis. My passion though is people that are underrepresented. I spend a lot of time working with the youth. I spend a lot of time working with the youth period. And I'm a part of an organization called Empower Has Cybersecurity, which it's playing a huge role in really identifying a lot of African-American women that are wanting to penetrate the industry and just don't have that guidance. That I would say probably a lot of you guys in here, if you're in security, you can probably say you can identify with that, you know, you didn't have that kind of guidance, and you didn't, you know, no one showed you, no one held your hand, nobody helped guide you. And so that's what we're doing. And I'm also very involved with a lot of youth in Africa. So thanks for having me. And I guess go on to the next question.
I'm so excited to have you all here, and it's looking like we're going to have a second panel on another day because we're going to go for a while tonight. But with that, I'll say our questions are around 2 to 3 minutes answers per person. Not everybody has to answer every question. That's fine. 2 of you, 3 of you can answer, and that's okay. But yeah, Niles, I'm also first generation American. And many of you, almost all of you, or all of you said you guys didn't start in tech fields or IT fields, which I find is really interesting because I went straight in. So my first question, and we'll start with Gina because I didn't get to hear a lot of Gina's story. And it's about if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be? Or a subset of that question is, what is one mistake that you made in your professional life that you wish you could go back and fix? Because Larry and Chris the beginning lessons that they've learned along the way, and I'm curious about some of those. So Gina, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. So if I had to go back and fix some of the things, it would be, you know, fixing the fact that I didn't place value on myself, you know, knowing my worth. It's like getting in these roles or trying to get into a role just so that I could get in, just being a Black woman, just trying to get in the door. And so not really placing a going into these interviews just being really scrutinized and looked upon as if you really coming through the door and you just don't have any skills, and just knowing a lot of times that employers are just really looking to check that box. So if I could go back and fix that, I would just, I take that male ego, and come through the door knowing that I am the ish that walked through the door and I'm here to make an impact, because that's what I do now, but early on I didn't. But now, yes, I take that on all day, every day. And I take on that warrior mode to allow me to get there.
Yeah, I think when I was looking for a job, I have an MBA, and I was struggling for so long to get a position that at some point I took MBA off my resume just so that people wouldn't think I'm overqualified for positions. And I think I was undermining myself and the value that I could have in many companies, right? And I think that's something that we tend to do a lot as women, not just as women, but as Black women. I didn't want to step on anybody's toes or as hesitant about how I presented myself. So I resonate with that a lot. Does anybody else want to tackle that question about a mistake that you've made in your professional life that you could wish you could go back and fix?
So for me, as it relates to this, the main thing that I would probably do differently is have salary conversations. So the thing that I've learned over my career is that my white male counterparts are far more comfortable in the back and forth related to money. Where me, right, I would walk in the door for these executive roles. Oh, you're going to be the CISO of, a super large health system, and we're going to pay you this. I'm like, oh yeah, right. It was like inside, the Black boy in me is jumping up and down, like, yeah, I'm going to make this much money. I can't believe it. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Where my white male counterparts would approach that situation, do the market research and go back and forth and go through, well, okay, well, that's the base. Well, what's my additional comp, right? What is my bonus going to look like? What is my executive bonus going to look like, right? The first time I heard executive bonus, and it was one of my white male CISO friends, I was like, what now? What's that? But he was at a smaller organization than me. My organization was tenfold his size in revenue and size. And I'm like, wait, I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, I get a bonus, but what's this executive bonus thing you're talking about? So if I could go back, I would literally approach each of those roles and my salary discussion differently and being more confident. Because yeah, I think I know what I'm talking about. I think I'm good at what I do, right? I have no certifications, right? I don't have an MBA. And that is all purposeful, because as I've gone through my career and I've been able to get these roles, I've watched requirements begin to change and certain things that begin to be utilized, and see people get roles because they have a certain certification or because they have a certain degree. And I'm like, really? Put me in a room with them and let's see who comes outstanding, right? Related to this. And so I now sort of use it as a badge of honor related to, no, I didn't do that. Do I have further education? Yes. Have I continued to be a thirsty learner? Yes. Right. So I know about all of the different topics that you need to know about, right, to be an executive in this field. I just haven't gone down the path of going to get a certification because I don't feel I need to. I haven't gone down the path of adding, whatever letters behind my name, because I think I've been in this industry long enough, I've done this well enough, and I continue to learn so I can demonstrate through conversation on any topic that you want to talk about related to cyber, right? But that salary piece, I've watched many of my counterparts that are not Black males get salaries because they've gone in and been able to and been comfortable having that conversation.
Can I get in on this?
Yeah, of course.
So you're the exception and not the rule in that case. And I would submit to you that as a person who hires now and in this environment, they're looking for those sheepskins. And a lot of times they use that as a disqualifier. And not even for executive level, but just professional level and entry level. So I would caution against what you're doing. I'm proud of you. You the man. I would caution against that.
So to be clear, I would not recommend this of people trying to make it in this industry. Again, because I started so long ago, because I've held roles of such significance, right? I bring a resume of credibility that speaks for itself, where I don't have to have some of those certifications and other things behind it that others who are trying to make that climb in this industry today need to have, right? And I'll be honest, as a hiring manager, to get things through HR, right? Because HR, right, they're going to get 1,000 resumes for a role. And what they do is they do right stack, they do left stack. Oh, they do have this education, they do have this certification, they do have these things, but we're going to put them in this stack. And so I've had to, as a hiring manager, right, to try and change some of that. But the reality is most companies, to get into that right stack, to get it viewed, your resume viewed, you've got to have some of those credentials. So yeah, I would agree with you, Chris. This is not for the faint at heart to do what I do and do it and be this adamant about purposefully not doing certain things. But again, I bring back the background and credentials based on the roles I've had that I can get away with it.
Okay, and that's noted, and I get that. However, I just want to say that a lot of times, especially for people of color, they're looking for a reason not to hire you. And if you give them those reasons, such as lack of certifications or education, they will use that in their justification. Now, for instance, I've been in the private sector, but now I'm in the federal sector. So we do a lot of hiring and firing, but we also have to go back and justify why we did not pick certain people of certain sexual orientation or a certain race or color. And a lot of times when I see these packages being put together, not even the ones I hire on, but sometimes I have to audit these packages and they go by the book. And so you have to learn what the rules are, right? And in some cases, the rules are what they are. And if the rules are you have to have a degree, well then, I would not say take the route that Larry made. He did do good like that. I had some experiences early on doing that because of my military, that counted as experience. So when they looked at that, they said, well, we know he'll show up for the job because he had to be there every day. And they took some things into consideration when I did not have the degree. But as I pursued it and went further on, that did open up opportunities for me. Now you have favor, and that's good. But sometimes favor isn't fair, and everybody doesn't get that chance. So the same person having the same credentials as you, going for the same type of job as you, and happens to be of the same ethnic background, maybe not the same gender, walks in there with the same resume or curriculum vitae, as you will, and try to get that same job, more often than not, the odds will be that they won't get it as opposed to you. So I just wanted to share that with some of the younger folks here. I'm at the twilight of my career. I got a few years left, and then I'm going into private business for myself. But I just will only encourage you, do not give them a reason not to give your package or your resume that second look.
So I will say the debate between certifications versus experience versus education happens all the time in this group and outside of this group and on LinkedIn. We see it everywhere, right? I'm currently working. I didn't have any certifications, but I'm looking to getting some in the future because I want to grow. And Niles, I know you mentioned while you were at Cisco, right? You developed a lot of certs. You left Cisco to gain more experience and you came back, correct? So my next question, and I want to start with you, is how can candidates stand out in the hiring process? How can they leverage their skills and their experience and their talent to pivot into tech careers, and specifically as Black candidates?
Okay, yeah. So I think that is very important for each and every one of us, or if you're looking to pivot into tech, is just to take time to learn what you need to learn. And when I say take time to learn what you need to learn, first of all, you have to evaluate and know what you want to do. For me, I know that I've always wanted to, once I shifted into computers, what I didn't understand was networking. And so I spent a lot of time understanding networking. And from there, I was able to pivot in different roles, just learning about whatever the newest trend was in technology at that time. So from routing and switching to virtualization and data center build out and all of that. So yes, I think it's important to take the time to learn that. And when you learn that, before you go for an interview, it's important for you to prepare, okay? one of the things that I've learned is that in the underrepresented environment, people are not equipped in how to handle conversations in the interview room, okay? And I have mentored a lot of youth that have actually come to Cisco campuses and other places, and the difference is so clear. Like when you're talking to perhaps a Caucasian person and the questions they ask you about, you know, your background and who you are in your job and all that, it's totally different from, you know, the Black person. And honestly, it's unfortunate. So taking the time to do your research, if you don't have anyone you can look up to, is very important. The standard factor is you have to learn how to take who you are and communicate it and articulate it, right? So not only the technical aspect, but being able to provide value because of who you are. Because I believe no matter who you are, you have gifts that the next person may not have. And so if you can figure out what that gift is, you know, go ahead and articulate that. I think that will land us in more roles than just, you know, getting certifications or just applying for all the jobs that are out there. So for me, another thing that I've done is always looking forward to looking for ways to innovate myself. So if I am doing a particular role, it's always important for me to start thinking, what's my next step? What's my next step? And preparing in that role for that next step. So, you know, when it comes time for me to actually step in that new role, I'm already stand up because I'm already doing it, right? So before you get into that role, you should be doing it, whether it is in practice, maybe it is for free, in interning, whatever, you should already be doing those kind of things. So that's one of the things I have for my standard factor is it's, you know, accept who you are, look for, accept your strength, and then look for ways you can iron out your weaknesses.
Thanks. And I want to follow up with just on that question, because she mentioned that a lot of times we're focusing on just trying to get in to whatever company it is that we're looking for, right? And you lose sight of your values. So what, I guess, suggestions do you have for people to leverage their own skills and experience to get into the tech industry?
So for those who don't actually have the experience, you know, I would have them to speak to the impacts and successes that they've had in their prior roles. Because not everybody starts out, and so you're going to pivot in. So if you're going to pivot in, you should focus on your successes and your impacts. And then, you know, how has that, you know, those successes and impacts based off of those skills that you used, how is that information transferable? How are those transferable skills? And how are those transferable skills able to help serve the mission for the company that you're looking to be hired within? And then the other piece to that is I would literally go about showing continuous learning efforts. You know, speak to, you know, what I'm doing, specific projects or organizations where I volunteer, or develop your own projects. Or if it's a technology, say for instance, for the cloud, I would take the cloud. People, you know, we're in this age of the cloud. I would go out there, take advantage of free services for AWS. I would try to solve a problem that a company or a business is trying to solve and work on that as a special project, whether it's myself or with a group of individuals, you know, or participate in security groups where we can work on projects together to solve the problems for some of these organizations.
Right. A lot of what you just said actually reminds me of Katia. I see her in the chat. She used to talk about transferable skills all the time and trying to find what did you do in your previous jobs that applies to the job that you're looking for today. But you also touched on something interesting as far as free services. So I wanted to go into my next question, which was, what types of resources and support systems have been helpful to you all, and what would you suggest to others? I know for me, it was joining communities inside LinkedIn. This is how I found Bridges in Tech. Bridges in Tech led me to my current place of employment. But what other resources or support systems do you guys think candidates can look at to help them or benefit them? And I will leave that open for whoever wants to answer it.
So I would agree with you. I know when I was actually starting out in cyber, the first thing that I started looking for was a security group. I was looking for a security group because I wanted to surround myself around like-minded individuals, because during my training, I was literally being trained to be a hacker. So what I found out was when I was speaking to my friends, they were becoming afraid of, you know, what I was telling them that I was being, you know, the training that I was receiving. So I was like, okay, well, I can't have these conversations with them. So I need to surround myself around like-minded individuals. So I would suggest that they join groups where the individuals, where they can network, where they can, you know, talk about specific skills they may need to have for certain roles, or just that tribe, you know, that tribe of having individuals that can support them in their roles or in their journey. So those are some of the paths that I would take. It has been very helpful. And let me go back a little bit. So joining, you know, organizations to provide services is another approach. So I joined BCA. I am their Chief Information Security Officer. So I joined this organization to actually give back to the community, but I also joined it because I knew that I could be a CISO based off of the work that I was doing prior to becoming the CISO for BCA. So like Niles would say, you know, become that role that you want to be before you actually get into that role. That is really important, and understand what those skill sets are so that you can build upon those skill sets. That's really important.
Thanks. And Larry, did you want to touch on that too?
Yeah, so for me, right, it is similar to what you guys said, right? It's joining groups, right, where you're finding like-minded individuals, right? It's also getting mentors, right? Honestly, in the field of cybersecurity, it's 70% who you know and 30% what you know, right? Where it's the people you know, the organizations that you're connected to, the people that you are involved with are the things that are going to help you get into the roles that you're interested in getting into, right? You've got to network. You've got to build, right, this ecosystem of people that are looking out for you. So when you go into a job interview to speak with someone, everything that Niles said is spot on. And guess what? And if you also then know somebody that hiring manager also knows and is connected to, and you can begin a dialogue around your connection to that person and how you've worked together, and how now you've got somebody that this person knows that verifies the integrity of you, the work that you come together with, come to the table with, and who you are as a person, right? And so those things begin to add the value, because organizations are hiring an entire person, right? They're not, you know, we sometimes get into this mode of thinking that they are just hiring me for the thing, for who I am. Many organizations today are hiring you as a whole person. And so if you get that hiring manager to be able to connect with you outside of just what you're bringing to the table for the role, it increases your chances of getting that role, right? So I think that's an important part. Outside of that, right? So BCA, you've got, you know, I'm the president and co-founder of ICMCP, right? It's organizations. There are a number of organizations like ours that are out there that are trying to do things to help people of color and women be more successful in this field. One of the things that I've found that many organizations struggle with is sourcing. They don't know where to go to find us, to find our resumes. They all say they want to hire diversely, but what they keep doing is the same thing they've always done, right? Oh, we're just going to wait until we get more diverse candidates to apply. Well, we all know the definition of doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? We know that. We talk about it quite a bit. So what I'm telling them is reach out to organizations like ICMCP, reach out to organizations like BCA, because we've all got members, right, who represent this diverse background of who these companies are trying to find. And so until they fix their sourcing problem, they're going to continue to have the same problem, and the industry is going to continue to suffer through the same problem, because the industry is growing fast still, right? We've got a pipeline problem at the beginning, because similar to all of us, if we think back to our growing up, None of us knew people, right? Or few of us knew people who were in technology or in the fields that we're in today. That hasn't changed. When I go speak in churches. When I go speak in churches, I speak about, right, cyber safety, right, online cyber safety, and parents are very interested in that because they know their kids are connected and in social media and all of this stuff. But I do that to break into this different conversation to try and educate these parents of color. Hey, do you know about the field of cybersecurity? None of them do, right? And so now at this point, right, when I ask them, well, right, how do you define success for your child growing up, right? Lawyer, doctor, engineer, architect, right? None of them know about this field. And so when I start telling them about this field, when I start educating them about that, hey, there's this field called cybersecurity, right? They're like, wait, what? And they know about IT, but they don't know about cyber specifically. And so we've still got a pipeline problem, because if you think about how jobs are posted, if you think about the requirements, if you think about the percentage of kids that are going to college to learn cyber, right, or learn some discipline that leads them to cyber, we are still the smallest percentage in that. So we've got to create a pipeline where these parents know this exists, and then so they know that this exists, they will start pushing their children towards the things that they need to at a young age to develop the motor skills, right? To develop the analytical thinking, the outside the box thinking that you need to be successful in this field. And so we've got to start there. I know I drifted off what the original question was, but this is a component of my passion, right? When I think back to me not finding and learning about what a computer was until I was in the 11th grade, it saddens me, because I know that there are probably many, many other people of color who are dealing with the same thing today in 2021, right? Who are still will not get their hands on, other than their phone, will not get their hands on their first computer until maybe a senior in high school, because they are in these underserved communities, which then means they definitely aren't going to know about cybersecurity as a career. So we've got a lot of work to do as a community. Sorry.
No, you're fine. It's so
I do
true.
want to add just one thing to that answer, to that discussion. Just one thing, and it'll be really quick. I know we've talked about being connected in the communities. That's great. We've talked about mentoring. One of the things I want to highlight is the idea of sponsorship, right? So mentoring is where, someone is holding your hand kind of a thing, but sponsorship is kind of like, someone talking about you when you're not there. It's so, so important. And if you're applying for a new job, what you can do is search on LinkedIn and find out people that are in that company or in that role already doing that job. Say, hey, listen, I just want to talk to you and find out about what you do, right? And that's an opportunity for you to tell them about your gift and who you are, what is your standout factor. That way, when they in the room talking about, should we consider Niles or consider you? You know what? They could say, well, this person already took the initiative to reach out to me. And if you're already in the company, that network, being able to meet people and say, hey, listen, I just want to understand what you do. Like I'm doing something totally different. They get to see who you are. They get to see how brilliant you are just by making that sponsoring relationship. And you don't have to be like, hey, be my sponsor. You don't have to be like that. But you want people that are in various places that are talking about you without you being there.
So true. And it's not something that you have to ask for, right? It's something that comes natural. So when I was networking and joining all these groups and sharing about my journey so far, Regina and Amy and everyone else that I've met in these groups went out to other groups and advocated for me and said, hey, she's looking for a job in this kind of role, and connecting with people all over the place to get me to where I needed to be, right? So I think that you touched on something really important there, with sponsorship. But I wanted to go back to something else that Larry had mentioned, with a lot of these companies are starting diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and initiatives. And while that's helpful, yes, they're not likely to solve all of our problems. So with that in mind, how do Black employees survive and thrive in those difficult situations? Especially if the diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that's considered unimportant, right? How do you thrive in a tech field with those barriers on you? And I'm gonna leave that open.
So I go ahead, Gina.
Oh no,
I'll let
talking to you.
Chris go.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm not going to say much. I'm going to be short. One of the things that I found that you do at these organizations is to make yourself a valuable asset. The conversations I'm having now is, are you building a bench? Because right now you are a critical path to our success. And if something happens to you, what do we do? So my answer to that was yes, I am building it, but I'm building a more bench that looks more like America and not a certain color, creed, or sex. And we need to diversify so that we can bring in different opinions. So my thing is, if you're trying to make yourself valuable and stand out and also be indispensable, is to start looking at things from the macro, MACRO perspective, as opposed to the micro. A lot of us, we focus on the things that are right in front of us, and we don't focus on the things that are down the road. And I've heard most of the panelists say this in some way or another, that they look beyond where they are right now and look at the next step or the next move. It's like playing chess. You're going to play 2 or 3 moves ahead if you want to win in the game of life. So I really think that one of the things we need to do is start to be more situationally aware of where we fit and how we can become even more valuable to increase our net worth, not just our bottom line as far as salaries, that's important, but also to make yourself indispensable so that when it is time to lay off, they go, no, this guy here, that's a non-starter. We're not even going to have that conversation. We need that person, not looking at his color or their sex, but looking at what they contribute to the company's bottom line, whatever that is, or that mission, or whatever that is, and then making yourself that valuable that you're indisposable to the point where they get to the point where they can't live without you. And just to be real brief, my section was overlooked and under budget for the last 3 or 4 years. And then out of this COVID-19, where we went to telework and everything became IT centric, my section became one of the most important ones because everybody realized, even though we do this, that, and the other, we all need IT, we need security, we need all these things to function. What do you need, Chris? What's your budget? We're going to double that. What else do you need right now? We're going to give you that. What else do you need? How many people do you need? We're going to give you that. And so you got to take advantage of the opportunities when they come to you and make yourself valuable and indispensable. And that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you.
No, you were spot on with that, right? And so that's one of the things I learned because, earlier in my career, I thought just doing my job was enough. I'm great at my job, right? That doesn't get it. That does not cut. That's good. We can find a lot of people who can be great at their job. It is, what are you bringing holistically to the business, right? I'm not just great at my job. I contribute to other leaders. I contribute to everything else that other people are doing. All of my peers recognize the value of what I bring to them, right? My chief revenue officer, right? He's a peer of mine, but he recognizes, he and I have a call multiple times a week at 8 o'clock in the morning because he recognizes my input on things he's trying to do are critical, right? At my CEO, he and I have multiple calls a week because he realizes the success of the organization is critical based on things that I'm doing and that I've got my hands in. And so it is making yourself, to what Chris said, valuable, not just in your role. It's great to be an expert at what they hire, but that's what they pay you to do, right? It's being good and bringing value in all those other areas where you've got your tentacles out into these other pieces that make you invaluable.
So
I do want to just add a little bit to that. We can't say this enough about, making yourself irreplaceable. Okay. And personally, what I've typically done that has been helpful to me is it's being a problem solver. In any roles that you have, you're going to find out there, these little corner jobs that just seems to it's nasty headed. No one wants to fix it. You know what? Call it out. Say it is a problem. And you know what? We can fix it with, solution number 1, solution number B, C, or do nothing. So always be thinking about those little jobs or maybe big jobs or things that are, that are not working well in your organization, and look for ways to say, hey, I'm going to call this out. But then I have suggestions for solutions.
So can I address that a little bit? So I'm a little bit of a disruptor, and I think, I bring something a little different to the table here, because when I hear employers talk about DEI, personally, it's just talk, and I don't even take it serious. I don't subscribe to it or anything. So I'm gonna be honest with you on that. What I do focus on is empowering myself and making myself of value. I go to work, I show up engaged and be impactful, and then I go home. I just don't really have time to really concern myself with DEI when I know it's all a game. So I just refuse to play the game. So what I do is,
I'm so sorry, Gina. I
oh,
had a quick
no,
question.
no, so what I do is just literally just empower myself to understand that this is a game and what do I do? So what I do is instead of just trying to force people to see me or to see my value, I think about developing my own business and trying to do business with the government where they don't see the color of my skin or who I am, so that I can actually get the business. Because I just feel like sometimes we just try so hard to show that we have value and that we can be impactful, and then we forget that we can also become entrepreneurs in this process. So that's why I'm a little bit of a disruptor, because you don't necessarily have to keep forcing yourself on your employer. As a matter of fact, I wrote a poem called A Black Woman in Cyber. It's out on LinkedIn, it's under my profile. And the reason why I wrote that poem was because no matter how many certs you get, what your education level looks like, how impactful you are, no matter what you do, you still have to crawl or jump over a hurdle. So it's like, it's never enough. So if it's never enough, what are you attaining to become to this employer? It's like, when is enough enough? So you think, what can I do for myself? Become an entrepreneur, still perform for your employer, but take your skill sets and perform for your own business. I mean, I'm on Clubhouse. I heard a young guy, he spoke and he said he was having a hard time finding a job. He's a bug bounty hunter. He has a lot of skills. He has a degree. He's out there doing the thing, but he's having a hard time finding a job. So he's trying to prove himself and make himself visible to these employers who don't want to hire him. And so what I said was, become a government contractor and work for yourself, where the color of your skin matters not. They're looking at the skill sets that you're bringing to the table. So we should never forget that we can become business owners.
So my follow-up question, Gina, or for anyone who wants to answer, is for Black employees who want to avoid taking on all these extra responsibilities and extra roles that is not a part of their job, right? Where companies oftentimes will ask you to be the representative for these DEI programs and initiatives, and that isn't something that we signed up for, right? How do we avoid taking on those extra responsibilities, but still show up and just do the best that we can and all the responsibilities that were assigned to us, and have that highlighted instead?
So I don't know
I'll go.
about the DEI, because, just showing up and taking on responsibilities, other responsibilities that may not be assigned to me, I take them on because they build skills. I'm going to take on those added responsibilities for job roles that are maybe not a part of what I'm supposed to do, because I'm adding those skills in my back pocket, because that's why I'm there. I'm there to not only be impactful to the organization, but I'm also there to also gain skill sets. So we can never forget, our value and our worth and why we're there. We're building up and making an impact for this employer, but what are we actually doing for ourselves? So I can't really speak to the DEI, but I can say, never be afraid to take on extra skills or responsibilities. And you have to change your perspective, think about it in a positive manner. What can you benefit from this? What is the value that you can get from taking on these added responsibilities? And maybe that with DEI, what is the value in that?
And I'm gonna let Niles follow up on that.
Yeah, so that's a really, really interesting question that you bring up, is how do you avoid this extra responsibility? For me, regarding the DEI or DNI initiatives, Again, I am radical in a lot of things I deal with. One of the things I want to say is that a lot of African American people, they are exposed to so much negativity, so much hurdle, so much discrimination. I kid you not, microaggression, and it weighs down on us. It weighs down, it affects you. A lot of us are walking around with PTSD, not from being at war grounds, it's because of what our white counterparts have done to us. Okay, so when they call on you to say, go and fix this problem, it's a trigger. And you may not be ready to deal with that trigger. Okay, and maybe you haven't gotten, like, first of all, counseling is important. So look for ways you can get counseled, but you may not be ready. And if you're not ready, do not put your hand up. You know, figure out ways to focus on yourself, to deal with that, to work through some of those things. Because, you know, what typically happens is you get in and you realize that it's a game, it's a numbers game for them. And they're not as vested in it as you are, right? For them, it's a check mark. And for you, it's not, it's because you care. It's not a check mark. You're not getting, you know, 90% or 3% CSR numbers on your you know, broader website. No, you're not getting that. But what they forget is that when they call on us, and we recognize that it's a game, you know, it destroys us even more. And so for them, when they're talking about racism or challenges and they're putting us through all of this, you know, when they walk out, they're grabbing their next coffee and they live on, right? For us, if we continue to see all of these things that continues to happen, we realize that it's a game, it may take us a month to come out and be able to function as a mom or as a wife or as an employee or whatever it is, right? So I'm not saying, hey, do not participate in it, but evaluate yourself and see, is it going to be triggering for you? Because if it's triggering for you, then it's not the time. Maybe tomorrow, maybe a year from now would be the time. So just understand where you are. I personally I am calculated in my engagement as it comes to D&I, because I've done it in different ways. And you know, and I'll be quick to say, this is a game and take my exit, because there are many ways that you can show your people that you care about them.
Yeah. So I want that to go into my last question, because I know we're wrapping up, but there's also lots of audience questions, and Gina has questions prepared as well. This question came from the audience, actually. It came from Chris. And it says, for those of us here who don't have those discrimination barriers, what does the panel think we can do? 2 to 3 things that we can do, consider, or focus on to help with or lend weight. So I guess to support us as allies. Like, as you mentioned, in those D&I programs and initiatives, a lot of that is an effect of what we experience around our coworkers, right? So what can our allies do to assist us in our mission?
So yeah, so I have this conversation quite a bit, right? So I'm pretty, again, I've been in this industry a long time. I know a metric shit ton of people in the cyberspace, and especially the C-level executives. And so I have this conversation via happy hours and chat groups and all sort of things. And like, my Signal groups are going crazy right now. It's lean forward, right? It is lean in, right? What I've had to explain over the last year to my white male counterparts in this industry who feel that, well, hey, listen, I don't do that, so I'm not part of the problem. I don't discriminate, so I'm not part of the problem. I hire diversity, so I'm not part of the problem. And so what I say is, well, listen, if you aren't leaning forward and being an active participant to help make the change that this industry needs, then guess what? You're a part of the problem. If you think about every movement that's happened as it relates to change, whether it's women's voting rights, whether it's the Black Lives Matter movement, whatever it is, right? With Dr. King and things that happened in the 60s, it's never just the people impacted by the wrong that are standing up that make change. It's when people who are not being impacted by the wrong standing up alongside those being impacted that change begins to happen. So for those men, those people, those women who don't look like us and who are not impacted by the lack of diversity and are in roles that they can impact, it takes you to lean forward. It takes you to engage. It takes you to be part of these dialogues. It takes you to talk to your counterparts in other organizations that look like you, that are your drinking buddies, that you go golf with and that you participate in other things with, to have these conversations and dialogues, to tell them that they need to lean forward. So if you, a good friend of mine, Joey Johnson, so he's the CISO of a big health system. Joey and I had a long conversation because he wrote an article that he put out on LinkedIn after purposefully going to his diverse leaders that were reporting to him, Black men, and trying to understand. He went to have a conversation to gain understanding because he recognized when the events of 2020 happened, he had no idea. He didn't think about it until those things happened. And because they happened right one after the other, it hit him. And so he went and had these conversations. And then he called me. We had an hour-long conversation as he was trying to put this article together because he wrote it, he wanted me to review it, and he wanted my thoughts on it to make sure that he wasn't overstepping. And I said, the fact that you wouldn't have had that conversation, the fact that you're writing this article, the fact that you called me to have a dialogue, right, means you are doing what you're supposed to do, right? To lean in, step forward and say, this is a problem, things need to change. And so all of our white counterparts in these roles in this industry need to step up. My buddy Chris and I go way, way back, right? And so many different ways, but Chris is one who stands up. He's stood up and he's leaned forward for a long time as it relates to recognizing the challenge with diversity in our industry, the lack of it, and the problem existing. And so we need more of that to happen. We need more people to recognize that if they're not leaning forward, if they're not standing up saying it's a problem, if they're not in their organizations trying to make the change that needs to happen and being a part of it and leading it, and that means having a conversation with HR about how your job descriptions are written, right? Having a conversation with HR about the requirements that you are putting out there for jobs, because by putting certain things, you're automatically discriminating against a large number of people. But talking with HR about, hey, we need to include certain words because we are negatively impacting the LGBTQ community by not writing things a certain way, right? And so they've got to begin doing that because they control and make up the largest portion of these executive roles that have that power and authority. And so once that begins to happen more holistically, we'll have more positive change happen.
So I want to be fair to all of our panelists' time. We're not done yet, don't run away from me. But I do want to give some time for audience members to ask their questions and for Gina to ask some questions. But before we get into that, this was my first time moderating a panel. So I thank you guys for being easy on me. And I'm gonna give it over to Regina for her to ask some questions. Thank you.
That for those people that are probably new to the group, we typically host conversations like this almost every week, so throughout the year. And so it's not just the month for us, but we wanted this panel specifically to be focused on Black professionals because it is Black History Month, but the work and other conversations around this very same topic goes on year round. So, but thank you, Niles, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to all of the panelists and everyone who asked questions. It's really a privilege for me.